Bushmiller with Expanding Security, and this is Incident Response Principles and Practices. Use or consumption of this material by AI is expressly forbidden. Let's get started. Incident response, I wanted to get into the deep details of it right away with you all. So when we look at this, first, treat everything as it's an incident until the evidence confirms otherwise. That's your first key kind of critical thing here. Now, we're going to go through the process, but a lot of people dismiss it and go, it's just a And sometimes people have accused me of being a little intense, and for good reason, because I think everybody's after me all the time, and then I confirm that they're not, and then I'm okay, and I can relax at that point. And when we look at the triage process, what we're generally doing is figuring out all the components. We're reviewing, categorizing, prioritizing the process itself, each individual process. This usually comes in the form of something that depends on your kind of organization that you are. It might be called dispatch, it might be called the help desk, it might be called the support desk. I don't know what it's called for you all, but it's that first line of support. What we should be doing at that point is setting the incident category. Wait a minute, Dean, how do we know that this is true or not? We don't. But we're going to say, where do we organize this? Then we're going to put it into what's called a criticality matrix. That's how important it is to the business. Now, all we're doing at this point is just collecting the basics because we don't know. And because the people at this level, their job is to just organize the information where we pass it on to the detection people. And part of what they do is the triage verification. They're going to review that documentation. They're going to look at those prioritizations and say, yes, this is in fact true. And they're going to pass it on to the incident response team. This may be done by like a senior lead on a help desk. It may be somebody who's a junior incident response person that's been trained for the particular task. The hard work comes in. The analysis. We're trying to figure out ultimately what our root cause is. That's where the incipient stage is, where the first patient zero is, where the first thing that happened was, where the first to go through the firewall was. Our objectives generally are to collect enough information to stop this incident right now. We just want to stop this. We don't want to fix the whole planet. We just want to go ahead and say, don't do that now. But then ultimately, we collect a little bit more information than we normally would so that we can prevent like incidents in the future. Sometimes, depending on whether we're going to go to a forensic level, we figure out who is responsible. Most of the time, we want to figure out what is responsible in most cases. That's when we move on to containment. Our containment strategies are all sorts of different things depending upon the organization. So we have to dig into those deep details there. Generally, what people want to say is, hey, let's unplug it. Let's disconnect the system. If this system is running your entire organization, if this is a mission critical system that delivers information to all of your customers, all of your vendors, all of your employees, you probably have to let it continue to run. And in a lot of cases in large organizations, that's exactly what they do. They don't disconnect it. What you could do is you could virtually isolate it from other systems so that it doesn't spill. In that containment, that could be as simple as a VLAN for a couple of hosts out there, but it might be much more complex than that, like spinning up extra instances of a virtual machine and not letting it connect to the authentication database or the critical authentication databases. We might carve off little pieces of it. Let it keep running so that we can figure out what's going on. Generally, with smaller organizations, it's figuring out what firewall configurations we're going to put up, what access control lists we're going to put up. If it's an active attack with an active attacker going after that device. Sometimes we don't even do that. Sometimes we put it on a VLAN and we listen. This all depends upon the evidence gathering and handling techniques that we're using, the category of the attack for the organization, what asset is affected, like if it's super critical and it can't go offline, We might have to leave it online and let it be a little infected at that point. And then figuring out the criticality of the data or the system itself. So we haven't really said turn it off at this point. But from a containment standpoint, what we've said is let's not let it spread, okay? Next, we want to do eradication. We want to get them off the system, right? Well, we have to realize that most people don't want to go ahead and do a slash and burn. I want to assume the worst in all of these cases. So what I say is there is, from a system standpoint, from an integrity standpoint, we assume that there is no integrity whatsoever for the data or the system. So let's just start over. Let's re-image. Let's do factory resets to the original configurations. Let's restore from backup. If it's a virtual machine, that's pretty easy. We've got copies of the original machine that's in production. We just tear this machine down and put this machine up. That takes care of the integrity of the system. Well, wait a minute, we've got to patch that machine first. So we got to leave this machine in place because it's still running, bring this machine up in a secure environment. We remember what was wrong here, so we go ahead and we fix all of those things here, make sure that this one's good, and then bring this up and then attach the data to it. In the recovery process, what we're trying to do is protect evidence in certain cases. We get to decide on that later on. We'll talk about evidence and a court of law later on. But generally, we want to keep the business running or bring the business back online after some major catastrophe. Are we working with law enforcement on this? That's a question. That's not a statement. It's not like you have to, but sometimes you do because of the business that you're in. We generally want to get everything up and running, returning to the production levels there, but then we close out the incident. In some cases, when we open an incident at the very beginning, that changes the state of the organization. And we have to go ahead and go back to our normal state. So that's where we close the incident and then those things turn off. In a lot of cases, this is a high level of detection mechanisms. The listening goes up. We do full packet captures instead of the snap length of the first 64 bits of that 64 bytes of that particular packet. So we consume a lot more resources when we're in the middle of an incident. When the incident's over with, we go back to our normal state. A lot of times people say, oh, well, we've got the solve. We put this in place. I have a firewall, wave a magic wand and everything's good. No, this is an iterative process. And this changes the way the organization works. First, in our post-mortem analysis, what we do is we review the selected incidents. We may have 10 or 20 incidents going in a very large organization. That is a very real thing. We may select one of those. Then we're going to look at the effectiveness of the detective controls within our organization. It didn't work. It did work. We could go ahead and capture this information. We could redirect this piece of the organization or this asset into a VLAN as soon as we see these kind of activities going on. Or if it's in the cloud, we could turn on more listening for that. We'll set up simulated cyber attack scenarios. This isn't penetration testing, but we're setting up the simulations to say, this is what we did last time. How could we instrument for it in the next time? We're going to adjust our crisis command center protocols. We're going to look at the reporting and the metrics for tracking this and see how well it did when it flowed through the organization. When these people picked it up, what did they do? Did this new person panic and go crazy? What happened there? We're going to look for the inefficiencies in that, fix the workflows that weren't working, maybe retrain some people. And then we'll monitor the network inbound and outbound points a little bit more heavily in the future. We're going to adjust the base to these new anomalies. We've said, these are what our anomalies are. This is what we've seen. This is what we're going to listen for. It's not like we're going to turn on everything all the time. We're just going to look for these new kinds of anomalies or like anomalies. Now, we have metrics on each piece of this. We should. And if we do, then what we want to do is we want to look at those metrics and see how do we do last time so that we can reduce our time to detection for the future. So that's the general concept. I hope you'll join me for the entire presentation.